believe in a higher world beyond this material dimension that we currently exist in? Do you believe in such beings as spirits and angels, and that it's possible to communicate with such beings when you need help and guidance in your life? Do you believe in the power of mind and of the human spirit, and that this universe in which we live is far more magical and fantastic than we have been told? If so, you're not alone. And in this podcast, we will endeavor to talk about some of these subjects and focus on the growth of our greater selves. This is the infinite journey. Blessings, one and all, and welcome to the Infinite Journey podcast. I'm Paul James Caden, and today we are going to have a conversation about being indoctrinated. And when a lot of people hear that word, they automatically think of religious indoctrination, and that certainly is a part of it. But we can also be indoctrinated by family members, friends, the education system, the news media, things we hear on the internet, things we read in books. There's no shortage of people that are looking to implant in our minds what they believe. And they will tell us that we have to live our lives according to what they believe and what they're telling us, or we're going to make some very critical mistakes and get ourselves in a lot of trouble. And so we find ourselves accepting these points of view, being indoctrinated, because usually the person who's doing the indoctrinating is or appears to be a stronger personality. You know, they speak very confidently. You know, they have that look on their face, they have that tone of voice. You know, they just kind of exude confidence and authority. They know what they're talking about. So, man, you better listen when they tell you something. And most times we do. Because the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, automatically sees that authority figure, that person who's indoctrinating us. They're so sure, they're so stern. You better get this truth. Don't forget what I'm telling you. It's almost like waking hypnosis where we just, oh my God, you know, this person is so sure, they're so strong, they're so confident. I better listen. They know what they're talking about. They're smarter than I am. They're stronger than I am. They know more than I know. And so we swallow the pill. And this is certainly true when it comes to religious indoctrination, because we look at the priest, we look at the pastor, we look at the organization, the church. These are holy men, these are men of God. They know what they're talking about. So we accept what they're telling us. But I think religious indoctrination is one of the things we can really look at to see how following those programs that are instilled in our minds by others are not necessarily healthy, nor are they necessarily right, no matter who they come from: mother, father, brother, sister, pastor, priest, people we love, people we respect, people we look up to. Because we see a certain number of people who are running on those old indoctrinated programs. They've ran on them all their lives. And they're out there in the midst of the chaos in the world right now, causing more chaos. The dance they are doing is not necessarily one that we want to join in with. because we can see that there's something very wrong with it. And even if we try to talk to these people, those indoctrinations are so ingrained in their consciousness that they become rabid, angry, attacking if you question or if you point out, hey, this program you're running on is self destructive, it's unhealthy. Look what you're doing here. It's what they've done, it's what they've thought their entire lives. They've based everything they are and everything they ever do on those programs, on those thoughts that were given to them by other people. And they don't want to let go. It scares them to think about letting go. And that's a very sad place to be in. And we have to have empathy toward those kinds of people, even though they can, push our buttons sometimes. Because these are very wounded people. They're, in a sense, trapped within themselves. But now there's another group of people, whether they were indoctrinated with religion or whether it's society or family members, there's a group of people who will outgrow the indoctrinations and they will realize that and say, I don't agree anymore with what my church taught me or what my parents told me or what I learned in university or whatever the case may be. And they'll get rid of those old programs. They realize they're not needed anymore. They weren't true. They weren't something that should have a whole life built upon it as a foundation. But the problem is with quite a large percentage of those kinds of people is that they look for someone or something else to indoctrinate them. They need someone to tell them what is right, what is wrong, who are the good guys, who are the bad guys, what is true, what is false. Because they have been taught all their lives, all of us who have been indoctrinated, we've been taught all of our lives to not trust ourselves. You can't trust yourself or your own opinion. You're going to make the wrong choice. You have to do it my way. You have to do it our way. You have to do it the way this group or this family has always done it, or you're going to run into a heap of trouble. You can't do it on your own. You don't have the capacity or the intelligence to do that. And so when these people get rid of old programs, they automatically look for someone else to give them a new program. So they'll start searching for people to agree with. Oh, that sounds good. I'm going to believe that. That person sounds like they know what they're talking about. So I'm going to let them fill those empty spaces within me. And folks, that's not what we want to do. We want to get to the place where we are our authentic selves. We want to make our own decisions and have our own viewpoints. And when we reach that place, there are some people that we will agree with and others we will not. But we will not be in a place where other people are at the wheel of our minds. And there's a lot of people that want to take that wheel. Think about how many times you probably said to yourself, I think, or I believe, or I'm going to do such and such a thing. But the very next thought that immediately follows up with that is, but what is so and so going to say? What is mother going to think? What is father going to think? What is husband or wife going to think? What is pastor or church community going to think? Because I'm thinking of making an independent decision that goes against or believes in something that they don't. In fact, I heard them say many times they're against that sort of thing, or it's stupid to do that certain thing that I'm thinking of doing. And so we question ourselves and we hide that thought under a rock and we don't pursue it mentally, intellectually, spiritually, financially, or in any other way because we're afraid of the ridicule. It's outside the lines of the group indoctrination. How many times have you said or heard other people say, I think about these kinds of things all the time, but I would never talk about this with my family or my friends or my spouse. So now we're starting to get an idea of how indoctrination affects each and every one of us. It controls who we are. And as I said earlier, it is neither healthy nor is it necessarily true, especially if it is robbing us of life, of being our authentic selves. I want to give a very, I think, stark example of this through religious indoctrination from my own life. For those of you that are new to the show, I'll reiterate this story for those who have heard it before. Bear with me as I retell. But when I was very young, and I'm talking 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, my parents weren't very religious. In fact, they weren't religious at all. I never heard my parents, my mother, or my father mention God, not until later in life. But I always had this idea. Again, I was 2, 3 years old. I remember being a little kid thinking to myself that I just felt this bigger presence around me. And it was loving, and it was kind, and it always had my back. I would talk to it in my mind. I knew it heard me. It comforted me when I was sad or not feeling well. It was just always there for me. And it was later on that, not so much later, maybe 6 or 7 years old, that I was introduced to this concept of God by my grandmother. And I thought to myself, that's it. That's who I feel around me all the time. That's what that presence is. It is God, the supreme being. So me and God, we had our own thing. I would talk to God. I felt that God listened. I would ask for help and, little childish things because I'm a little kid, and that help always seemed to come. And I'd always think to myself, wow, what a wonderful, magical place the world is. And we all have this, loving presence that's always with us. This is great. But I remember my first thought, my first indoctrination that gave me pause and a little bit of um, anxiety over this concept of God actually came from my grandfather. And he wasn't doing it to scare anybody, but I mean, me and my brother were little kids, and he was trying to explain to us that one day God will destroy the world by fire, but then he will make it new again because the fire is coming to get rid of all the bad people and all the bad things. But he also told us about this concept that God had these books in heaven, and when you did something bad, it got written in the books. And when you died and went to heaven, if the bad things were more numerous than the good things, well, you didn't get into heaven. So you had to make sure that the good things were much more numerous than the bad. So here's this concept. I didn't quite understand Why is God going to burn the world up? He's God. He could do anything. He could just make bad things not be. He could just help people be good in some way that I don't understand. Why does he have to burn it up? So that was kind of creepy. And who are the bad people? Who are the bad people and the bad things that are going to be destroyed and not be a part of the new world that God makes? And when you think of bad, at least back when I was a kid, you thought, well, when me and my brother are running around the house, making too much noise playing, and the parents or grandparents say, "Hey, will you kids be quiet and stop making so much noise?" Well, that's considered kind of bad. You're making too much noise. Be quiet. So did that get me a check mark in God's book? If I took a cookie out of the cookie jar before dinner, well, nobody was looking because I wanted that cookie. I was told I couldn't have a cookie, but I took it anyway. Did that get me a check mark in God's book? If I told a lie, because kids lie, they exaggerate the truth, and when you're doing it, I did when I was a kid. Did that get me a check mark in God's book? So was that bad? Was I going to be destroyed in the fire? So that gave me a little bit of a pause, like, that's, maybe God isn't as friendly as I thought he was. Because man, he's keeping tabs and he's worse than Santa Claus. He's got those books and every little thing gets a check mark in one one column or the other. And then it was later in life when my parents decided they wanted to find religion. So we ended up going to this little Methodist church in a place called Greenville, New York, in Orange County, New York. And we had some relatives that had gone to that church, and they talked my parents into going. My father had a bit of a drinking problem, and I think it was the whole thing to help him find God. He would stop drinking, he would deal with his issues. But as I recall, there were a lot of hellfire, brimstone, angry, wrathful God sermons that came from that pulpit. And what was I by then? 8, 9, 10, and it scared the crap out of me. The pastor would tell sermons like when someone stubs their toe, when you catch a head cold or get the flu or have a car accident or someone gets a terminal disease, this is not by coincidence or random happening. It is God punishing us for our sin. He's giving us a spiritual spanking, were his exact words. And there were many other sermons like this, and that really sent me spiraling as a kid, like, wow, God keeping tabs in that big book, watching everything that we do. Um, Man, he's not happy if we mess up even a little bit. And that was driven home because I tried to be a good kid, and I wasn't a bad kid by nature. I wasn't rowdy. I wasn't, I didn't cause trouble. I wasn't, causing any kind of mischief. But if I would come down with a head cold, if I got a toothache, if one of my favorite toys got broken somehow, I remember sitting on my bed, sitting in my room, kind of sulking and kind of looking up at the ceiling toward heaven, toward God, thinking to myself, what did I do? I don't remember doing anything bad. What did I do? Why am I sick? Why did my toy break? Why did this little tragedy happen to me? I must have done something bad. And I would sit there and think about it and try to figure out what it was. And most times I couldn't come up with anything except, again, maybe I was playing too loud that one day. So it took a heavy toll on my thinking. And then, of course, that progressed into the rest of life where you're exposed to this kind of thing. God is wrathful, God is hateful, God is jealous. And it caused a certain amount of religious anxiety in my life right up until probably my mid-latter 20s when I finally recognized this and started to deal with it. But it took a while. It took a while to get all of that out of my system. And even to this day, at 53 years old, sometimes you'll find a little piece of mental shrapnel that comes up, and you'll be like, "Oh, what is that? What is that uncomfortable feeling? What is that thought that I'm having?" And when you put the magnifying glass on it, you realize, geez, that's from the old religious, negative religious indoctrination. So it can take a long time to get rid of those things. And there, for a while, years back, I was the kind of person who wanted to get rid of one set of, indoctrinated beliefs and find something else to replace it with. Okay, what is truth? Some someone tell me what truth is. And right there was a very big mistake that I had to learn. Don't do it because people will always lead you down the rabbit hole. Some can give you good advice, some can point you in the right direction, but when somebody wants to become your teacher, your guru, your direct communication with God, come to me and I will tell you what God is saying to make you a better person or to save your life or whatever the case may be. That is time to run. Don't walk away, run. The best way I heard it said years ago was by metaphysician Emmett Fox when he said, "The true teacher comes into our lives, gives us what we need, and then goes his way. He doesn't stick around and want to make you his student. He doesn't stick around and want to make you like him. He doesn't stick around and try to indoctrinate you with what he thinks the truth is. He gives you the nugget of truth that you need, and he moves onward. And you grow that seed within your own consciousness, within your own soul. So we need to stop looking at people as authority figures. See, we're here to help one another, to strengthen one another, but not to be masters of one another. And this is where a lot of us have it so wrong because we're always looking for the master figure, the leader, because that's what we've been taught. That's what we've been indoctrinated with, if you will, in this world. Always look for the teacher, always look for the authority figure. It's mother, father, teacher at school, professor at college, friend who's bigger and stronger and knows more than you do. It's priest, it's pastor, it's whomever. So we're always looking for that authority figure to look up to. Tell me what I need to know. And we make them a fixture in our lives. And then, even if that person had something positive to offer us, we didn't take that gift and move on. We clung to that person until they started indoctrinating us, and sooner or later, they will all indoctrinate us with their personal opinions, their flaws, and their foibles, because we're all human beings and we all have them. So then the water becomes polluted. Then the original seed, the original gift you were given, gets lost to you and what it was supposed to do for you and in your life. And this is why, unfortunately, the world is in such the state that it's in right now. I've said this in my old podcast on the spirit side that religious organizations have sadly failed many people because they indoctrinated them. They didn't give them the spiritual food or the seeds to grow their own soul and grow faith in their own soul. They were told how to have faith. And a lot of people recognized this. A lot of people became disenchanted with religion, with politics, and they went out and they tried to fill it with something else. Now it is politics, it's conspiracy theorists, it's all these crazy things that are out there jabbering at them. Because remember, there's no shortage of people that want to take the wheel of your mind and tell you how to believe, what to do, what is right, what is wrong, what is true, what is false, who's the good guys, who's the bad guys. And 99.9% of that in the world today is just polluted water with maybe a little bit of spiritual truth or wisdom, or started out with a lot of spiritual truth or wisdom. But the person espousing that truth said, oh, now I see a way that I could make money at this. I can get followers. I can start a group. I can start my own church. I can start my own movement. I can be somebody, so the ego kicks in. And though they're out there telling you that they're channeling God, this is what God told me to tell you now, it's usually filled and polluted with ego and personal opinion. And maybe there's somebody out there that needs to hear this right now, but when you see all this fear mongering going on, the people that are doing the fear mongering, everything's coming to an end. Oh my God, this is happening, that's happening. This is fake, that's fake. That is not spiritual truth. That is someone speaking to you from the God of their own ego, their own opinion. So be very careful of that sort of thing and don't become influenced and indoctrinated by it. We have to be honest with ourselves, and we have to take a little time each day to go within ourselves and recognize what is me and what is the opinion and indoctrination of other people, and we need to get rid of that and don't look to replace it with someone else's indoctrination. And we'll talk in a later podcast how we might do that. What is one technique we can use to actually clear out the subconscious mind, clear out those old programs? Because it's important. And sometimes the clearing out of those old programs may even come as a religious epiphany or experience. I remember when I was 12 years old, I had this incredible angelic experience, and it reoccurred in my life several times over the years. And I always wondered, what was that? At first I thought maybe I was crazy, I was hallucinating, but in later years there were people around me that saw and heard certain phenomenon that was happening around me or in the environment that I was in. And I didn't tell these people, they just said, hey, what was that? Do you hear that? Did you see that? People were seeing the same thing I was seeing. And it took a while. And I was actually just talking to my wife this morning about this. I said, I think that angel was actually an emanation from my own consciousness, my own higher self that came to me when I was 12 years old to let me know there was love in this world, there was love in this universe, because I was very doubtful of that at that time because of the religious indoctrination I had been given and the behaviors of a lot of people around me. But I think that was a emanation of my own higher self, my own soul, to show me that there was love in this universe and that God was not the way I was being told he was. Get back to that pure and innocent connection. And that was November 15th, 1979. And it is now 2020, and I'm still on that quest to get back to that pure connection I had when I was a child. I'm a lot closer than I was, but I'm still not 100% there because this is a journey getting through, getting rid of a lot of indoctrination. So sometimes those kinds of things might happen in our lives as well. And in metaphysics, when we see an angel, metaphysicians will say, well, there are celestial angels, but angels can also be an angel thought. They are something that will come from within us. But that doesn't make the angel any less real because the kingdom of heaven is within you. Interesting. So sometimes the universe, I guess, throws us a bone, gives us a helping hand. And some people might say, well, why don't I see an angel? Why doesn't my higher self manifest such a thing? Or why doesn't God send me? Well, you know what? Here's the thing. Maybe you didn't have that experience. Maybe you will at some point in your life, or maybe you'll be one of those people who just never have that kind of experience. But remember, it's about helping one another. There's tons of stories out there of people that had experiences just like the one I had. I'm telling you about my experience now, in brief, as it pertains to this subject. And that is one of the ways in which we help one another. I had this experience. I'm sure of it. I know what I saw. As they used to say, they couldn't beat it out of me with a stick. Hook me up to a lie detector, whatever people want to do. I know and had witnesses that I know that something happened. And as I share that with you, maybe it will encourage you to read other people's stories. Or maybe that will just be enough to say, you know what? I hear something in that story that this guy's telling me that rings true to me. And I feel that I need to do the same thing. I need to get back to that innocence, that pure connection with the divine. I need to start living my life from the center of my own heart and soul, not anybody and everybody else's. And if you have that thought, if you have that feeling, then that is your angel thought. That is your soul. That is God. That is the angels. That is Holy Spirit speaking to you and telling you, yes, my friend, it is time. And it really is time. It's time to really start evaluating what we think, what we believe, how we live our lives, why we think, why we believe, why we live our lives, in those certain particular ways. And if we're seeing it's a way that's filled with anger and fear mongering and hate and finger pointing and all of those negative human characteristics, and if we're around people that call themselves ministers or teachers or ministries that teach us to do these things, it's time to reevaluate because that's not going to help us get back that pure connection. We have to become unindoctrinated and we need to be our real, authentic selves because then we're truly living a happy, joyful, fulfilled life. And again, we're going to talk about in future podcasts, maybe next week, about some of the ways in which we can do this. And they're relatively simple. If you take maybe a half hour a day, a half hour once, twice a week, and use these certain techniques, you'll be surprised at the buckets of sludge you will get out of yourself and how much lighter you feel spiritually and emotionally, and how just like you're seeing the world for the first time in years. But you know what? If this podcast and the things we talk about here help you, share those techniques with somebody else. Teach somebody else how to do it. Pass on that seed that you learned. Don't indoctrinate other people. Just say, hey, I learned something that really helped me. Try this. Put it in their hands. Let them do it or not do it. But this is the way we change the world, little by little. It's as if each and every one of us are holding a candle, and some of our candles are lit and some are not. And we do the best we can as we go throughout this journey of life to light other people's candles. Help them become unindoctrinated. What would happen if we were all just being our authentic selves? And in the same respect, respected each other's differences and loved one another. So what? I'm black, you're white. You're Democrat, I'm Republican. You're this, I'm that. What does it matter? There are things we will disagree on, things we will agree on, but we're all being our authentic selves, and we can love one another, and we can treat one another well and respect one another despite those differences. Because now we're reaching a time and an age where we're just we're done with indoctrinating one another. We want to be free beings. And when you're free of all that nonsense, and it's like you're waking up and seeing the world for the first time, just the peace and the love and the calm that you have. You don't have that mindset anymore to fight and to argue and to point fingers and blame and hate and try to dump all this intellectual, pseudo psychological nonsense into other people's minds. You're just done with all that. You're free of all of that. And again, we'll talk in the future, maybe next week, about some of the ways to start that process. So I hope you got something out of this podcast today. I thank you for listening. You know, start taking a little time each day just to examine your own thoughts and your own feelings. In today's political climate, if you're a Republican and you see a Democrat, and the minute you see a Democrat, you just seethe with hate. Look at that idiot. Look at that libtard, as they call them. Stop for a minute and ask yourself, why am I thinking that? Why am I having those kind of feelings toward that person? Do I really know that person? Is the entirety of that person's psychological and spiritual makeup and their character all based on their political persuasion? Or is that just a small part of who they are? Am I grossly overestimating who I think they are, but they're probably not? Who told me I should hate that person? Who told me I should feel this way about that person? Who told me that person was the enemy? And why do I believe it? See, now we're getting somewhere. We're starting to think about and evaluate and probe these thoughts and feelings that come up within us. But again, that's a bit of a story for another day. But that's enough for now just to keep an eye on what we're really thinking and see if we can identify where or who it came from. So again, I thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of this podcast today. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, be good to one another, walk in love and peace, and I'll see you next time here on the Infinite Journey.